Thank you so much for watching Riff TV. Now, this interview is obviously with video, but I don't interview everybody on Zoom. That's why I put it on my Talkin' Rock with Meltdown podcast. We talk to rock artists from all over the genre. So check out Talkin' Rock with Meltdown wherever you get your podcasts. And now to today's video interview. William, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Meltdown.
You got the book. It's out today, the Meaning of Metallica, Ride the Lyrics. We'll get into the book here in just a minute. But first, kind of go through like a little bit of your history as to, what you do, which is so fascinating. Tell everybody like your background.
Well, let's see. So I'm a professor of philosophy at a small school in Pennsylvania called King's College. And I've made a bit of a dent in publishing with a series of books called And Philosophy. So they started with Seinfeld and philosophy, and then we had The Simpsons in philosophy and The Matrix in philosophy, and it's become a cottage industry of its own.
No kidding. So then, but you also teach is that right? You teach a metal class?
I've not taught a metal class, but I certainly dropped my metal references and Metallica references in particular into class. It's been part of my teaching style to try to work in pop culture references, to take a subject that a lot of students are sort of scared off by, philosophy, and merge it with something that they already like and are familiar with.
Yeah, that's like it reminds me when I was in 12th grade in high school. About 87 years ago, we used to have a rock class every Friday, which was always fun. And the teacher was like a rock guy. So that was always like a day I looked forward to in English. But so anyways, well, let me ask you about this before we get into the book. So you're a metal fan, right?
Big time. Yeah. I was, Beavis and Butthead, me and my friend Joe, before there was Beavis and Butthead. So, going back to Ozzy and Sabbath and Priest and Maiden in the early 80s, and then Metallica hits the scene, and that's sort of a whole new level.
Yeah, it sounds like you and I kind of grew up in similar situations. I discovered Ozzy shortly before Randy Rhoads was killed. So yeah, that was my gateway, was hearing Crazy Train on the radio when I came home from school that day, and I heard Ozzy's voice, and then it just opened up a Pandora's box of just searching for metal.
Yeah, you've got OG status on me there, though. I discovered Ozzy the summer after Randy Rhoads died, so that was sort of tragic in that way. And it's funny the way just a few months tend to make a difference, in that you look back as if there were this golden age. It always seems like it was a couple of years, before I came along, and everybody seems to see that way.
Well, it's so cool to discover a lot of this stuff too. Like, are you into vinyl or anything?
Oh, well, I mean, I have my whole collection of vinyl from back in the day. I haven't been buying new vinyl, but yeah.
Yeah, because I got back into vinyl about 5 years ago, and on the hunt for 80 Metals records, those are hard to find.
Are they? Yeah, well, people probably don't want to part with them. I have down in my basement, which is my sort of exercise room, I've got things all framed, all the first 4 Metallica albums, and Slayer, and the first Sabbath album, and a couple Iron Maiden albums. But yeah, I got to dig out some of the others and put them into rotation.
Yeah, the first record I ever bought, and I still have that specific, that particular copy, is Ride the Lightning.
Really?
Yeah,
that is awesome.
First one I ever bought. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just listening to it actually this morning, getting prepared for this interview. But let me ask you this: what was the first concert you went to?
First concert was Maiden with Queensryche opening. They played a whole week at Radio City Music Hall in, I forget if it was late '84 or early '80, probably early '85.
Okay, so you would make it into the city to watch concerts then, eh?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I was in Yonkers, right outside the city, and so most of the concerts, yeah, I mean, maybe at the Garden, or out to Jersey, or out to Long Island. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, my first was Ozzy in '84 in January, and that Bark at the Moon tour. That's the famous
Oh,
one with Motley Crue, where they were snorting the ants and stuff down in Florida. You know.
oh, so jealous of that memory. It's
Yeah.
only yours. I can't take it. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, let's talk about the book here. Like I said before, the Meaning of Metallica, Ride the Lyrics. Now, when I first heard about this book, I thought the book was going to be specifically about Ride the Lightning, maybe because of just just the title, but it's not. It's about all the Metallica. And it's so interesting how some of the songs you kind of connect with other songs, not only from Metallica, but from other bands as well.
Oh, cool. I'm glad that you think so. Yeah. So, I mean, there could be a whole book on just Ride the Lightning, and maybe I'll follow up and do that if there's enough interest. But yeah, so the book spans Metallica's whole career, from Kill 'Em All up through Hardwired to Self-Destruct. And it focuses on the lyrics. There are a lot of great Metallica books out there, but most of them are biographies or kind of stories behind the songs, sort of compilations. This one, I'm looking at the lyrics and sort of taking the lyrics as serious art on their own. And so instead of cataloging album by album or song by song, I go thematically. So it starts off with a chapter on the songs on religion, right, which include like Creeping Death, Leper Messiah, The God That Failed, songs about addiction, including, of course, Master of Puppets and Low Man's Lyric and Fixer. And then on and on, other themes like war, death, resilience, emotional isolation, the whole range. And I let songs that are thematically connected kind of talk to one another, and I draw out some of the associations and some of the continuing metaphors and all that kind of stuff. So hopefully it's the kind of thing I write it as a fan, and I hope it really appeals to fans, and it's not the kind of thing that some professor went and ruined Metallica on us.
Yeah. So you mean, well, first of all, how long did it take you to write this book?
Well, I mean, that's a loaded question. Maybe I've been writing it since 1984 when I first heard Ride the Lightning in my head in one way or another, but more to the point, probably it was 6 months from start to finish of the first draft. And then as these things go, I pass around the draft to beta readers and that kind of thing and make revisions and send it to the publisher, and they want more. And it's just always a longer road than just the writing of the book. But I mean, it was, if there ever is such a thing, it was a labor of love. This was just something that I always wanted to do, to be able to take the time just to kind of let myself really almost bathe in the lyrics and give them this kind of treatment.
Yeah, of course, I've played a bazillion Metallica songs on the radio. I've seen them a bunch of times. I've had the pleasure to interview them. I think the first time I interviewed Lars was in 1992 on that Guns N' Roses tour, and that was a lot of fun. I met those guys, I think, for the first time in '91. I actually got to sit in the Snake Pit when the Black record first came out. That was really cool. They had fans actually inside the diamond right there. So, how many times have you seen Metallica?
Yeah, well, if you don't mind, I'll say I haven't actually met them like you, but just connecting with you this way is kind of really cool for me. If you wouldn't mind mentioning for the listeners, I used to listen to you when you were on the radio back in Buffalo, where you got
Is that
to
right?
start. Meltdown. I was in grad school at the State University there, studying the philosophy that I would then go on to teach. And you were this cool DJ on the radio, and through the miracle of Twitter, I find you maybe a year or so ago, and bamboozled my way onto your show here. And just for a little historical color, you were mentioning 92 and 91, so it's probably about 92 I first started listening to you in Buffalo, and 93 is the Aerosmith song Living on the Edge, which has the lyric Meltdown in the Sky. And that was just so cool, right? Because you're the voice on the radio coming through the airwaves, and Steven Tyler singing Meltdown in the Sky. So
I just tweeted out about that because somebody asked me about that recently, and I don't know if you saw that, but I said to Steven, I said, I thought I got this perfect thing I'm going to say to Steven Tyler, and we're going to become great friends. And I said to him, I said, did you say, and I was kind of nervous. This is the first time I ever met him. And Ted Shred was standing behind me, a local radio guy in Buffalo. I said, in that song, now I can't think of the name of the song because I'm talking to Steven Tyler. I go, in that song, did you say meltdown in the sky or meltdown and this guy? Like the Jimi Hendrix thing, right?
Yeah. Excuse me while I kiss this guy.
Right. Yeah. So Steven Tyler looked at me and had no idea what I was talking about. and now I'm stunned and I don't know what to say. And Ted Shred goes, living on the edge. And he kind of he mumbled something and walked away. But I got a picture where I'm talking to him and he has no idea what I'm talking about. But
with greatness. Yeah.
No, that's so cool. I can't remember if we corresponded or you told me that or not. I don't know. My memory is not great, but that's awesome. That was, like I said, 1 billion years ago.
Well, yeah, but you know what? Buffalo radio, I was coming from the New York City market. Buffalo radio was so much better for my taste than New York City radio. New York City radio was still so catering to the baby boom generation that you would like almost never hear Ozzy or Metallica or something like that on the big stations there, NEW or K-Rock. So I came to Buffalo and, I'm hearing stuff on the radio. I can't believe this. and you were the DJ I remember. I can't, name anybody else. I'm sure I was listening, all the time in the background, but there you go. So it's just cool to connect.
Yeah. And I remember Metallica, they put the Black record out and then they toured on that for several years and they put out Binge and Purge and they opened up that tour in Buffalo at Darien Lake. And the outdoor shed, right? And so they were there all weekend long, Memorial Day weekend. They were rehearsing on one side of I'm not going to say, well, it's kind of like the fairgrounds, but one side of the amusement park. And on the other side, there was this religious, thing that was going on. So Metallica was there all weekend long. And I got a chance to interview Lars that day. And it was really cool. It was all live on the radio back then. I interviewed Lars. I carry all this equipment with me backstage. I interviewed Lars as I'm wrapping up my interview. I asked him to go on the drums to play the end of Sad But True, which he reluctantly did. He said, okay, fine. He does that. And as I'm wrapping up my interview, James walked in, which was really cool. So I put him on the radio for a minute. Anyways, I walk out of the backstage area in the parking lot. It's like a Monday or whatever, Sunday, whatever day it was. And the whole parking lot is filled with cars, all listening to the radio station because Lars was on the radio station, and it was so cool to hear. But, those days are gone with, with every other thing in the world going on right now. Sure. So tell me, so you still haven't answered. So how many times have you seen Metallica?
Oh, sorry about that. Maybe 12 or 13, something like that. So first time was Master of Puppets tour. They're opening up for Ozzy. I went to see them out in the Meadowlands, where I guess that's what it was called at the time.
And you got seen with Cliff.
Yes, I saw him with Cliff, my claim to fame there. And I got stranded in the parking lot with my buddy Eugene. Guys that are named Eugene usually aren't lucky, right? Because they're named Eugene first to start with. But we were lucky that night in getting stranded because Metallica popped out of the out of the bus. And I didn't get to shake hands or say hello. I was a little guy pushed away by the crowd, but we got like 15 feet away, and man, is that seared in my memory, that's my closest brush with Metallica so far.
I think that I saw them for the first time at Monsters of Rock, which was '88 when it was a couple of years after Cliff had died with Scorpions and Van Halen and whatnot.
Great show.
So tell me about this book. So were you totally immersed in Metallica? And I know that you said in the book that, like, I think your wife or something is not a Metallica fan. She was helping you out with it and everything. But were you just totally immersed in the lyrics?
Yeah, well, you know what it is for me, right from the beginning, despite being sort of Beavis and Butthead goofy early on, I was also sort of the budding philosopher with the existential crisis and whatever. I could have been listening to the Smiths, I guess, but that's not really what spoke to me. So from the beginning, Metallica was sort of my introduction to poetry and therapy, both of which I really needed. And I think a lot of men need, and they don't find in the conventional places, particularly guys of our age, going back then. Hopefully some things have improved, right? But that it spoke to me right from the beginning. And Fade to Black, which is basically a suicide song, really spoke to a lot of the depression and anxiety that I felt. And instead of encouraging suicide, as maybe some of those religious folks might have told you a song like that does, it had the opposite effect for me, and I think for a lot of people. It offered hope and in the fighting spirit to continue. And so from the time I'm 14 all the way up through my midlife crisis and my current happy middle age, they've always been therapy for me in terms of getting in touch with feelings and finding words to express them. And poetry, like I say, is the kind of thing that guys tend to shy away from. And lots of times, the way it comes across in an old book doesn't speak to you, but people love song lyrics, and I certainly always have. So that's how it started. I've been thinking about these lyrics and sort of bathing in them forever. And I started off writing something totally different. I was writing a blog for Psychology Today. I blog for Psychology Today. And I was writing about this book, Educated, by Tara Westover. It was a big bestseller at the moment. And she was raised as a Mormon fundamentalist. And in writing about that, I was quoting from some Metallica lyrics in The God That Failed, and talking about Hetfield being raised as a Christian Scientist. And all of a sudden, it turned out to be not about this book, Educated, anymore, but I'm writing about Hetfield and the lyrics. And it just sort of took on a life of its own for me. And as listening to the songs has been therapy for me over the years, writing about them all the more so. So yeah, the project just took on a life of its own that way.
I mean, do you think that I've never really thought about it before, but James Hetfield is probably one of the most prolific writers in heavy metal, right? I mean, he's got to be.
Oh yeah.
Who's better?
Yeah. Right. I mean, listen, I haven't tuned into metal that developed from like the death metal scene and the black metal scene. So I can't really speak to what goes on there. And I'm sure if I say he's the greatest metal lyricist, somebody will try to tell me about a death metal band that I've never heard of from Sweden or something that. And maybe they're great. But in terms of bands that are widely known in the metal genre, I don't think you can be touched.
Now, how much research did you do into this? Or was this all kind of like your synopsis of the way you looked at it?
Yeah, well, I mean, so I've definitely read every book about Metallica ever written, and there are a fair number, and I hunted down every interview that I could find. So in the few cases where Hetfield has talked about the inspiration for a song or something like that, I knew it. And so that was the main research that could be done along those lines. From there, I'm treating it largely the way one might treat a novel or poetry, where it should stand on its own, apart from what the author or the lyrics writer, says about it. And one of the potential hazards of doing this is listener fatigue. Probably like you, I've heard these songs hundreds or thousands of times, some of them. And the last thing I wanted to do was ruin Metallica for myself by, playing Master of Puppets 10 times in a row to get it in my head, right? So what I did, and again, almost discovered this by accident, was I would memorize the lyrics for a song that I was particularly working on at that day or that week or whatever, and I would sing it. And I've got nobody's idea of a good voice, right? I can't carry a tune. I can't play an instrument. So I confined this largely to the shower and while I was out walking the dog, and then singing it in my head. But I discovered that was a really great way to get in touch and almost reverse engineer what's going on with the lyrics. And when you think about it, it's an exercise that the English teachers sometimes will put their students through, and the students don't know why, to memorize a short poem. And there's really good reason for it. Hearing it and reading it is one thing, but getting inside it by actually voicing the words the way that they're supposed to be voiced, really, I found gave me an insight.
Now, have you sent any copies of this book to the Metallica HQ?
Sure did.
Yeah, did you?
They've been very polite and helpful, and seems like a great organization. Of course, I had put in a request to actually interview Hetfield in the midst of the writing process, and I got a polite no, which is fine. I understand. Like, I mean, he's a private person, and he's close to the vest about the lyrics a lot of the time, and that kind of thing. So I totally respect that. But boy, would I give anything to sit down and talk with him sometime, even if it were totally off the record about some of the thoughts that I have about his art.
Now, usually when you were talking about the songs and the lyrics and stuff, you referred to him, I guess, as the narrator. Is that kind of commonplace for doing something like this?
Well, so that's a good question, right? So I don't want to identify Hetfield, the person, with the voice or the character that he creates in some cases, right? So just like if you're reading The Road Less Traveled by Robert Frost, it's not necessarily Robert Frost, who's going to take the road less traveled. It's this character, the narrator that he envisions. I think in a lot of cases, you can see the person, James Hetfield, bleeding through the lyrics, and sometimes very clearly there, as for example, in The God That Failed, which really does reference his upbringing as a Christian Scientist. But then there are other. So Fade to Black, for example, is a good example of this. He didn't write that out of a sense of utter despair himself, like potentially suicidal. It was inspired by simply the theft of some equipment, which was a huge bummer and a downer. But he used that down state to imagine a down state several levels down from that, and created a voice, created a narrator to tell the story and tell the reflections. And his ability to do that as a young man, really, when you think of how young he was with Ride the Lightning, is really incredible.
Yeah, some of these things, like you think about like the Appetite for Destruction record, those guys were in their early 20s, and that record's like a masterpiece, and it's like those guys boozed up, drugged up, came up with this just, changing album. Fade to Black, by the way, was the last song I ever played on, I don't know if you ever listened, and said you were in Buffalo, to 14X. We were on AM, Rebel Radio. We were only on for a year, but we would play, it was a heavy metal station. It didn't matter what time of day it was. Nothing was day parted. We'd play And Justice for All at 7 o'clock in the morning. It didn't matter, but Fade to Black was, obviously the last song I played. So where do you think, in your opinion, where is Hetfield's like his peak moment as far as lyric writing?
Well, that's a really interesting question, right? Because my answer to that would probably be different from, for example, what the peak album is. I'm an older guy, and so I tend to be in the camp that says, well, Master of Puppets and Ride the Lightning with a height, and it goes down from there. But lyrically, and this is controversial for a lot of people. I think the very best and the very worst are on the same couple of albums, which are the Load albums.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, you have songs that are almost an embarrassment in terms of the way in which Hetfield always avoided cliches, and then you get something like Fuel or Ain't My Bitch and 2x4.
I was going to say Fuel. I love Fuel.
Yeah, I mean,
it is different from what they were doing. As you point out in the book, I didn't even realize it, but you talk about religion, addiction, death, and all of a sudden it's like, well, here's a song about my car. It's like
that
does kind of come out of left
totally
field.
Avoided until then, right? But then you have other songs where there's just such incredible subtlety in the lyrics, particularly on the issue of addiction, which he was struggling with then, but hadn't, as anybody knows the history before Some Kind of Monster and the Saint Anger album, hadn't really directly addressed. But you have songs like The House That Jack Built, and you have Low Man's Lyric and Fixer on Reload. So some of the best subtlety is there. And I love Mama Said, the country song too. And going back to the Black Album has its share of real jewels lyrically as well. I mean, Enter Sandman is nobody's idea of Shakespeare, but The Unforgiven is just incredible. And then you have all kinds of great self-reflection in songs like The Struggle Within and My Friend of Misery. And, so it's kind of fun to think about from my perspective that there's a lyrical depth at a point in their career where the music doesn't appeal to me as much. So it helps me out as a fan anyway.
So did you watch Some Kind of Monster? I mean, you've probably seen it before, but did you watch it again, kind of like to get the juices flowing a little bit?
No, I haven't rewatched it in a while, and it would be interesting to go back and look at it. Well, one of the great things about that documentary, right, is it's so warts and all, and it's so in moments embarrassing for them, but that's just the way, in a sense, they've always been. You can think of the sort of stereotype of a metal brute, and sometimes Hetfield gets depicted that way. But he's always been very emotionally vulnerable in his lyrics, and there you see it on film. And so, yeah, I mean, it just goes to show. I was reflecting just a little bit before this about the line out of Damage Inc., right? That honesty is my only excuse. And that was such a great psych up song, Damage Inc. back in the day, right? Living on your knees, conformity, dying on your feet for honesty, right? Go against the grain until the end, all that. And of course, fans, a lot of the old school fans say, they really didn't live up to that. But in a way, I'm sure they weren't perfect, and I wouldn't say they were perfect in being honest and authentic, but they sure did what they wanted rather than what was just expected of them. And so maybe honesty really is the guiding virtue, and authenticity is the guiding virtue for them, or Hetfield in particular, who's the one I focus on with the lyrics.
Well, speaking of that, I messaged Greg Renoff earlier today when I found out that you guys had kind of made a connection. And Greg Renoff, for those who don't know, wrote a couple of Van Halen books and Ted Templeman and that kind of thing. And he said is Metallica's lyrics division of labor, is it mostly Hetfield, or do they collaborate? I was always under the impression it was mostly him.
Oh yeah, it's almost entirely him, except on Saint Anger. Where they had the idea that everybody would pitch in. I mean, of course, it could turn out to be the case that in ways that we're not privy to. This is one of the things I'd love to ask Hetfield in person. And you know what? Hetfield has a kind of a poet's ear, I think, for an overheard phrase or something like that he can use, right? So, for example, Creeping Death, the phrase actually came from Cliff Burton when they were watching the old movie, The Ten Commandments, and the sort of mist and fog is coming under the door to kill the firstborn. And Cliff goes, whoa, that's like creeping death, right? And, if that were just you or me, we would have said, yeah, and that would have been it. But Hetfield, picks it up, maybe writes it down, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing what he was able to accomplish, back in the days of Alcoholica, as far as writing lyrics and whatnot. And it was just the 39th anniversary of when they kicked Dave out of the band, just last week, I think it was.
Right, because he had an alcohol problem, right? Among other things. Yeah, no, but it's true. But it's also, I mean, you mentioned Guns N' Roses as well. I mean, history is filled with, tortured souls who've abused alcohol and drugs and produced great work. And a lot of them, unfortunately, die young, right? And we've got songs in the Metallica catalog that sort of address that too, like a song off the newest album, Moth into Flame, which is inspired by, Amy Winehouse, and just that kind of subtle suicide that some people have a passive death wish that they don't necessarily want to live, but they don't necessarily want to kill themselves. And, alcohol and drugs is a way out. And thankfully, it didn't take Hetfield that way, as it could have, I suppose.
Yeah, I think he stumbles from time to time, but he's been able to pretty much keep it above board, which is good. I've had a chance to meet him a few times, and he's just the nicest guy. And he's, for my money, he's one of the coolest rock stars. Yeah. On stage, he commands the stage. He's a god amongst men, and he's just like one of my favorites. Even to talk to, though, it's just a nice guy, and he's all about his cars and different things like that. But hopefully you'll get a chance to meet him sometime.
Oh boy, I would do anything for the opportunity. But I'll tell you what's super impressive about him that way is, like you mentioned, he's this God among men as a front man, right? And as everybody knows, in watching the early videos and that sort of thing, he was, very shy, introverted guy, had a difficulty, but he rose to the occasion. It had to be done, right? Likewise, as a singer, it was really not, his great preference that he should be a singer in a band, but It had to be done, right? And I think the same is true of lyrics, right? He probably never thought I should be a guy writing lyrics, right? He's first and foremost a guitar player, but he's just so good at something when he sets his mind to doing it, and he does not do it half-assed, for so many bands, as long as you have a kind of a catchy chorus and a cool phrase here or there, that's enough. But that was never enough for him. Well, I shouldn't say never, Fuel, but for the most part, and from really early on, really took it very seriously. And as you and I were saying before, people will dispute it, but I would say he's the greatest lyricist among metal artists.
Maybe I'll throw that out there on my socials today because everybody has an opinion. But you mentioned Fuel. I remember interviewing James one time, and I said, "How many cars do you own?" And he started laughing. He goes, "I don't know." So you got to give him a break with one song about his cars, okay?
Oh, I know. It's just a cliche that he studiously avoided for so long, right? And then he indulged it,
Well, the fans will say what the fans will say about the mid-'90s and the haircut and the whole thing, Right. But just the fact that you had to go back and revisit Saint Anger, I just do not like that record. I'm not like out of school saying that, I don't think, but it's maybe the only piece of Metallica I don't physically own. I the first time I heard it, I thought, did they send me a demo copy? Because I just don't get this.
Yeah.
I think that record was actually not that far away from being a really good album, but the sound was terrible. I can go on and on about Saint Anger, but it's just, it's just not, for me, it's just not good.
Right. But I mean, the funny thing is, and I'm sure you're aware of this from talking to so many fans and listeners, that there are some people for whom Saint Anger is their favorite album. It's just amazing the generations of Metallica fans, right? I don't even just mean literally like fathers and sons, although we've started to get more and more of that. But like with every album, at least for a good stretch, if it was the album that came out when you were in high school, and the first one you bought and you paid your own money for it and you listened to it 1,000 times, you become convinced that this is their best work. I don't think it is by any stretch. But it's kind of like it's been said before that everybody's favorite cast of Saturday Night Live is the one that was on the air when they were in high school, right? There's something about being that age, you really are, I don't want to see it impressionable, but yeah, impressionable. Life is just so vivid and life is just so intense for you that the music you're listening to, the movies, the TV you're watching, is just makes a huge impression.
You talk about impressionable. In your research or when you were looking through these songs, did you notice any sort of with the different producers and stuff? You just talked about how James kind of became a singer, and a lot of that has to do with Bob Rock.
Yeah.
Did the producers have any impression on him when it came to writing songs, writing lyrics?
Well, That's a good question. And right. And again, that's the kind of question I'd like to ask him directly, because there's really no way to say
All
for
right.
sure.
I got to save that one for my next James interview. Okay.
Yeah, write that down. But you mentioned Bob Rock. I mean, Bob Rock has called him the Bob Dylan of his generation. So I don't think anybody was telling Bob Dylan, what lyrics to write. So I would guess Bob Rock took a hands-off approach. I imagine only Lars has any kind of real impact on James when it comes to lyric writing. I mean, you think of that sort of moment in Some Kind of Monster where some part of a song, Lars says that's kind of stock.
Yeah, right. Oh yeah, James took offense to that.
Yeah. It's like, Keith Richards is necessary because there's got to be one person in the world who says no to Mick Jagger, right? Lars is necessary no matter what anybody else may think of him, because otherwise you have Hetfield that's unreined, and creativity comes out of constriction as much as it does out of freedom. You have to be reined in by something.
Yeah, kind of stock. He might as well have just said that lyric blows. Right? It's like that's what he should have just said. Yeah. But no, it's so fascinating, this book. I didn't even, like I said, I've been playing these songs on the radio for 32 years, during my career. And, sometimes you play them and sometimes you listen a little bit closer. And, I mean, I'll tell you what, like something like, the Black record, it's just like looking back on that 30 years later, 31 now, that record is a masterpiece too, as far as I'm concerned.
Sure it is. And the deep cuts on that album, right, are just incredible, right?
Some of the songs I like more now than I did when I played them first. Yeah,
no, I could definitely see that. Definitely.
And that's where the band really obviously took off. I mean, I'm not saying nothing there, but right. anything that you learned that kind of surprised you from writing this book and doing your research?
Yeah, so one song in particular that surprised me. There's a good bit in the book analyzing the Unforgiven trilogy of songs.
Yeah,
and the second Unforgiven, the Unforgiven 2, is kind of a love song, but it's love gone wrong, right? Talk about vulnerability, right? It's about the narrator needing someone, right, and presumably a woman, it sounds like, and opening up to her, and she's opening up to him, and then if you follow the line of the lyrics, right, it appears that she betrays him, and rather than finding forgiveness for her, she is unforgiven too. And he either kills her or imagines killing her, if you don't want to think that he kills her. And that, I had listened to that song hundreds of times, and it's just so subtle, some of the lines toward the end. Anybody should take a look and a listen for themselves. But she'll never love again, dead sure she'll be there. What have I done? I can't quote the lyrics all that well off the top of my head at the moment, but listen to the song and check out those lyrics. And it's kind of creepy. It's kind of creepy.
Well, they were known to write some creepy songs from here and there. So there's the book again, the Meaning of Metallica, Ride the Lyrics. And like I said, I was pleasantly surprised. I started reading this. I thought it was just going to be Ride the Lightning. I'm like, wait a minute, he's talking about all the different songs. So that's pretty cool. What else do you want to plug? What else should people know about this book as we wrap things up here?
Well, you know what? In the book itself, I give my email address, William Irwin, my name, @kings.edu, and I give my Twitter handle, William Irwin 38. And I really would love to hear from people who read the book. As someone who reads a fair number of books himself, sometimes I'll get in touch with an author. Like you mentioned Greg Renoff before, who's a terrific Van Halen book I read, and a friendship comes out of it, or at least a connection. But then again, sometimes I contact an author and I never hear anything back. I won't be that guy. You read the book, send me an email or a DM on Twitter. Tell me what's missing. There are some songs I don't cover. Why in the world did you write this book and not talk about whatever? You could name the song yourself that's not in there, or tell me what you think I got wrong. I mean, I think it's a conversation worth having, taking these lyrics seriously, particularly for people who already have been for a good long time, particularly for people who find it therapeutic to listen and to think about these lyrics. So I'd love to hear from any of your listeners who take a look at the book.
Is there any other lyricists out there from the heavy metal world that you'd like to do something like this with?
Well, nobody is at Hetfield's level when it comes to lyrics. I mean, you and I talked about being fans of Ozzy and Sabbath, and there's some great stuff in there as well. I mean, of course, Geezer Butler wrote most.
I was going to say, Ozzy didn't really write a lot of that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, Ozzy had more input in a lot of places than people give him credit for, and so. For me, if there's another sacred songbook in the heavy metal library, it's the Sabbath Ozzy stuff. So I would dig just swimming in those songs for a while and writing about them.
Or maybe even the Iron Maiden camp, because they definitely delve into some wild topics.
Oh yeah, and such a huge canon of work at this point.
Yeah. Well, William, thanks so much for the time. Like you said, you're out there on Twitter, and I check out your tweets periodically. Here's the book once again, and you can get that. It's out now. It's out today as we do this. But I really appreciate your time. It's always fun to talk. Always fun to talk rock and roll with someone. I was thinking about this earlier. I'm lucky enough I get to do a lot of interviews with the rock stars, but sometimes it's fun just to talk with fans.
Well, I appreciate you giving me a chance to do it. And like I said, it's such a cool moment for me to connect with you after having heard you on the radio a long time ago.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, William, thanks so much for your time. I appreciate it.
All right, Meltdown. Take care.